live from the city of Melbourne, where Polaron's head office is. I'm Eva Hussein, director at Polaron. And I have this really, really great pleasure to introduce to you someone very special. It is very early in the morning in France, where Paula is. Paula is actually a very lucky holder of a Polish passport, which she received not that long ago. But she's originally Canadian. Welcome, Paula.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Before we came on air, we were having a little chat about what Paula's been up to and what languages she speaks and a little bit about her family history. But let me tell you that Paula's got an amazing job in wine and food promotion, and she's based in the south of France, and she can maybe tell us a little bit more about. And what you're seeing in the background is an old French farmhouse. So we are very, very suitably jealous, Paula. But tell us a little bit more about, I guess, your mum and your Polish family. So we're very interested in, people that watch these sessions want to know what happened. How did you make a decision about, firstly, getting your Polish citizenship and what happened, and also a bit more about your family, because your mum's gone through a very interesting journey of immigration, of displacement, of being a refugee, essentially, I guess, in a way. So maybe if you could touch on that'd be amazing.
I tried to look into getting Polish citizenship about 20 years ago, and it was very complicated, and you had to go to the consulate, and it was all Polish. And when I presented it to my mother to help me with it, she was like, no, that's not going to happen. That's too hard. So I kind of gave up on it for a really long time. And then a friend said to me a couple of years ago, I'm sure there are people that help with this now. And I was like, you think? So I just Googled and I found you guys, and I found excellent reviews, and I'm absolutely pleased as punch with the service, but it had made that journey so much easier. So my mom, both my family is all Polish, but my father was born in Canada, but my mom was born in Poland in 1936. So she wasn't there very long before the Russians came and made them leave. Yeah. With nothing but the clothes on their back. So they had my grandfather was fighting as part of the army, but my mom has 4 other sisters, so 5 daughters, and my grandmother had to leave, and they were in work camps and things. So first they were in Siberia, and then they were in Uzbekistan, and then they went down to the Middle East, and they were in Iran, Iraq, Lebanon. Wow. So they were moving all about, and it was very difficult times. Luckily, my mom was very young, but her sister wrote an account of everything they had gone through. And, at the first part, when they were in Russia, it was very difficult. There was very little food, and they were cold. And I think as it went on, it got a bit better, because my mom, when she talks about Lebanon, she has this sort of dreamy ideal of this place before Lebanon was destroyed. It was this wonderful, warm, amazing climate. So after that, they went to England for a few years, and then they finally, one of my mom's sisters took the first step to go to Canada from England and kind of got settled, and then they all went shortly after, I think around 1947, 46, if I think something like that. So and then it's typical in Canada, you land in Halifax, and they didn't have proper paperwork. So we actually don't know if my mom's birthday is really, well, I guess we do now because it was researched, but before it was sort of like they had to just put a birth date on her information, and they lost a lot of papers because of that. So they didn't have a ton of information. They had very little with them, but they did have their landing papers in Canada. So we saw all that sort of stuff. But it was not an easy journey for them, certainly, to get to Canada.
And I think what you speak of is both typical and so admirable, I guess, because they were so resilient. And I mean, I've obviously never met your mom, but from what you say, they went through a lot, but yet somehow managed to make it into a good story, into a story of resilience and getting on with life. And, we were talking just earlier that when they arrived in Canada, and your mom was only 3 years old when the war broke out, so very little. And then there were, that journey that you described, that thousands of kilometers, and a lot of the journey they walked, or they were in cattle trains and they had no food. And yet, you know, in places like Persia or Iran of today, or East Africa, which some people eventually ended up with, they were welcomed, which is an interesting take on you know, sort of what happens with refugees today, that they still live in a world that's, you know, very confusing, let's put it that way. But I think what you've described is that that really strong Polish spirit. I don't know if you think your mum had it, because I know that she sadly passed away not that long ago, and I was very, very sorry to hear that, because unlike many of the families that we work with, you actually had first-hand witness and information and dates, and it sounds like she was very engaged in the whole process, although she couldn't help you with the paperwork, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. You have to understand, the paperwork 20 years ago was overwhelming. And so I understand why she didn't want to participate in it, because the heavy lifting would have had to be by her. But yeah, no, I would spend a lot of time when I go home adult and talk to my mom about that journey, because I just found it such a fascinating story. And yeah, like, because she passed away recently, I had to write her obituary, and I put that in because I thought it was a really important story. Like, you know, not just the typical she had daughters and this and that. I put in that story, and people really liked it because it was like a little insight into, and it definitely informed who she became, because she said it in particular in Lebanon and in the Persian countries, that they were very welcome, and they were not separated into camps. They were just in the community in different departments. And so, you know, my mother really appreciated how they didn't treat them as outsiders or poorly because of who they were. And so that informed how she felt about refugees in Canada and people coming to Canada, like that she totally believed in, you know, being welcoming and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, no, it definitely changed who she was.
And did she give you that sliver of Polishness, and do you carry that in your heart? I know it's a bit abstract, but what about your own identity? Because I think it's a bit of a strange one to ask people, but how Polish do you feel? And what does that mean for you to be Polish?
Well, it was really funny. When I was young, I wished I wasn't Polish because it was too Polish. And I think we saw this with a lot of my family members, that because they left Poland, they tried to hold on to that heritage, like with iron. They were just holding on with everything they got. We had so much Polish in our life: Polish church, Polish dancing, all the Polish traditions every year, Polish school, you name it. And so when I was a younger person, you know, I felt like an oddball because everybody was Canadian. And I had these European parents who made us sandwiches with rye bread instead of white bread, and never peanut butter. There was always some stinky meat. And you always just thought, oh, I want to be one of them. So yeah, for a long time, I wanted to not be Polish. And then as I got older, then I really appreciated that I had this wonderful heritage, and that I liked not being just a plain Canadian. But right, you have to pass through that where you feel so like a bit like an outsider. And I didn't like that when I was a kid, because everybody else was just so neutral, but my family was not neutral.
Right. And I guess it happens with age as well. And it's part of that journey to sort of reconnect with your heritage. But I think as we were, talking before we came on air, you were telling us that you were actually going to go to Poland in 1980s, right? And what happened? Another major thing happened that sort of messed up your plans, huh?
Yeah, for years, my sisters and I belonged to a Polish dance troupe, and we would go all around Ontario and travel. And there was this big festival happening in Poland. We were so excited, and we had all our tickets booked. And then Chernobyl happened, and they advised people under a certain age not to go because the high levels of radiation. And so we had to cancel. I believe they canceled the festival too, and it was very disappointing because it was I was quite young at the time, like 13 or 14, and it was like, woo, escaping the parents to go on this awesome trip.
And I think the other thing, now recently you had another plan to go, and then the pandemic happened. And I think, a lot of people that we speak to, actually August, September, where, they all had holidays booked. And because Poland's such a interesting destination. And it, you know, like I say to people, look, yes, there's a lot of media, some of it very positive, some of it's not so positive, but you know, don't believe everything you read. But as far as a holiday destination, it's an amazing place because it's quite diverse. So you have the seaside, the mountains, the lake district. And of course, your family comes from, we just looked it up on the map, from the center of Poland near the city of Płock. So you were kind of maybe potentially planning to go, and then pandemic happened. Is that right? Is that what happened?
Actually, it was more that she passed away. I mean, we
Oh,
would have had to cancel because of pandemic, but we were hoping for this fall. But she was suddenly at Christmas, they found something. So we had been planning about this time last year, so for this fall. And so, I mean, it would have been probably canceled because we were a mess trying to travel with her during this pandemic, but that was more why we had to cancel.
There were other reasons, and I'm so sorry about your mum, but I know that she would have been very proud of you being a Polish passport holder, I'm sure, because you were also saying that you've been sort of working, well, essentially remotely and within the wine and food industry, and in France, you would spend a couple of months a year. But now you can stay longer, is that right? You don't have to go back, and then, you know, that passport gives you a lot more flexibility, I guess.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It's a big deal as a Canadian because we don't have a lot of ties with other countries. So to have a tie to the European Union is massive. You know, it's sort of like opening up the world, really. You know, and I've always felt really comfortable in Europe, so it feels a bit like home.
Well, I also wanted to ask you about your grandfather and your grandmother, because you said that they had your mum, and she was the youngest. Did you say? Am I correct in that? How many kids did they have? And he was in the army, I think you said, at some point. Yeah, maybe you could tell us a bit more about your grandparents.
Yeah, my mum had there were 4 daughters. No,
okay.
5 daughters. Sorry, 5 daughters. I come from 4. They're 5. Lots of women in my family. Yeah, all women. So yeah, my grandfather was fighting in the war, and I think he was stationed mostly in Italy. So they didn't see him for years. And you know, I didn't know my grandfather very well. He was very quiet and a bit standoffish. So, but my grandmother was like the matriarch, you know, of the family, and she sort of held everything together all through the transition. But even when they were in Canada, you know, they were very hardworking people, as is typical, and didn't have very much, but were always, you know, it was always great going over and having wonderful homemade Polish food from my grandmother. And they were very quiet, reserved people, serious people, but they were, my mom's mom lived to 96. So
oh wow, so very,
yeah, and she was still living on her own.
So pretty independent, and sort of what you're describing is, I guess, a bit stoic and a bit pragmatic and just getting on with life. Is that the kinds of values that you were given, like as a child? Because it sounds to me like it was a really Polish family where, I don't know, did you go to Polish classes on Saturday, or was it just a dancing?
No, we went to Polish class too, and we were at church every Sunday, and then during Easter we were there all week long. No, we were. My mom actually was really active. There was a new church in our neighborhood that came up, and so she participated. I mean, we all were, but my mom was really serious about it. She helped fundraise and make decorations for the church, and she was on the choir, and she was, you know, really, that was a big part of her life. So, but you know, we had a really big extended family too, with her having 4 sisters. My dad only had 1 sister, but we had quite a big Polish family. So yeah, there was lots of time with lots of family.
Right. Very interesting. So you mentioned food, and given what Poland's not a wine making region, of course, although they do make wine. I don't know if you know that, but do you know that they make wine near the German border?
Yeah, I believe a lot of Eastern Bloc countries are making. They're just not well known for outside of their. Yeah. countries.
Yeah. Because I think if you go to Polish restaurants, some of them will have Polish wine, and I'm not sure how, you know, they now have the provenance or the history of winemaking as France or Italy has. But what about food? You mentioned Polish food. Like, what featured on your table? Was it like Sunday lunch, or what happened in your family when it came to food? And who was the best cook? Oh, yeah, that's the question.
Well, my mom's mom, my grandmother, and her sister, she was the best at making pierogi, and well, everything she made was delicious. My mom was an excellent cook, but she didn't really like cooking. So she, you know, when you have 4 children and you're doing all this cooking 3 meals a day, so we would kind of reserve a lot of the Polish food for very special occasions like the holidays, because it was a bit time consuming. But my mom did teach us, well, I was interested, maybe not my sisters, but how to make pretty much everything you could make. Like, more normally we would have something like bashed, because it's an easy soup, you know, or things like that regularly. But like, to make pierogi or gołąbki, that would be, you know, that's a big deal. So it's got to be for an important holiday. But we were always, my mom was not that good at making pierogi dough, so she kind of stopped doing that. So my sister took up the mantle, and now she's the pierogi maker and I'm the gołąbki maker.
I see. But everything's made from scratch, right? You don't use any ingredients that are sort of pre-made. It has to be, proper. Right.
Yeah,
so,
and we had always had a big garden, vegetable garden. So we always were using our own canned tomatoes and our own. We would just pickle and can everything from the garden. My mom was, you know, well, I mean, we were not rich, so you did that, and I'm glad, because it taught me a lot, and it probably made me so interested in food, all the way from growing it to, you know, preserving it.
Yeah. And I think that also made you very cool, because, you know, before we were, you know, recycling was cool, or having your own vegetable, you were there already, right? Well ahead of your Canadian friends who were eating white bread with peanut butter. Yeah,
that's how our summers were spent, in the garden and pickling and canning. And it was always like, can we just have fun? Nope.
You Polish, you cannot have fun. There's no word for fun in Polish, right?
No, that's it. It felt like that. It's like, you just have to work.
It's a really good and important work ethics, I think, and it is what makes part of the Polish fabric, I guess, where, you know, you're supposed to be a decent, hardworking, church-going, you know, proper person. So it's very interesting to hear that. So Paula, just for a minute there, I wanted to go back to some boring stuff, and that is the process of citizenship, because I think, you know, some of our listeners might want to hear that. So was it reasonably, and be as honest as you can, was it reasonably painful, or were they bumps in the road?
I would say it's, you know, it's a bit of time to get yourself organized, and there's a lot of paperwork. So patience is important, but I would say it wouldn't have been as bumpy, but I did it with my sisters, and my one sister was a disaster with her paperwork. And
hopefully she's not listening to this.
She knows she was, and so she, you know, she had to keep sending the proper things, and she made mistakes somehow, and it really held things up. So I put a lot of that on, and I was sitting there, I did my paperwork so quickly, and I was like, thanks, Joanne, because we were doing it together. We had to all, you know, have our stuff in together. So other than the time, I mean, you know, you have to put some energy into it to organize yourself and get the documents and look through the stuff and send it all. I mean, you know, there's a bit of work, but it didn't seem particularly bumpy.
Okay, well, that's really good to know, because I think, you know, we when I talk about that journey that you went through, I do say to people that everyone's journey will be a little bit different. So in your case, very lucky that we had your mum, that we could ask questions of, that she had documents, that she was able to, you know, provide really useful information for the family tree, or if the Polish government had any questions, she was able to respond. But that's not the case for a lot of other people. And I think the fact that you can name every single country that she's been to with her sisters and her parents, it's quite amazing. So, and that's because she was around to tell you. And for some clients, we start with nothing, like they barely know their grandparents' name, if they know it, or they have, you know, misspelled butchered name that we start
Yeah.
with. So I think, you know, we need to thank your ancestors for being so diligent, and your mum in particular, that she, well, first of all, that she was around to help us along the journey, and secondly, that she was so engaged and well informed, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'd never really thought about it, but I did think I wanted to while she was around, because it makes a big difference, you know, so.
Okay, well, look, I think we've covered a lot of ground. So what I'm going to do is hand over to Andrea for some questions.
Thank you, Eva and Paula. So I have a couple of questions for Paula. There's someone who wants to know, what were your motivations to pursue a Polish citizenship or your Polish passport?
As I said before, I had been interested in it for years, and it just was really complicated. And I think when I found Polaron, that was a major motivation to me, because there was somebody that could help me navigate this. And I had recently, a couple of years ago, I met this Australian woman actually who happened to be Polish, and she was going through the process of getting her passport. And it sounded, she wasn't using a company, and it sounded really complicated. And so again, kind of put me off the whole thing. So a major motivation was finding someone that can help me. And it was a done deal when I saw all of the reviews and what people said, that for me, but also just to have another passport, it just opens up a whole other world to opportunity to have freedom, to be, you know, move around the world more freely.
Thank you, Paula. How long did it take you to get your actual certificate of Polish citizenship?
Oh,
I think we lost Paula.
I have lost Paula. So by way of background, so that everybody knows, Paula is actually on a farmhouse in France, and she did say that her internet connection is a bit shaky. So if we'll just give her a few minutes.
Eva, if you can just briefly explain to us the timeline. So how long does it take, the whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do that once we're waiting. Hopefully Paula can reconnect, but if not, we'll send a very warm thanks for sharing her information. So basically, it depends what we start with. If we are starting with very good documents like Paula had, it can be, 3 to 6 months or even less. But if you have a sister like Paula has, who was sort of dragging her feet a little bit with documents, that sometimes means that there are delays. So on average, it does take between 8 and 12 months to get the entire process done. And that includes everything from start to finish to get your passport. And that includes registration of your birth and marriage certificate if you're married, citizenship certificate. Oh, we've got Paula back. So it really does vary in terms of, that journey. But so we can give you averages. Hello, no, that's all good. I've told them that you're on a farmhouse in south of France. So everybody understands and everyone's jealous, including me. So the question, Paula, was how long it took from start to finish. So what I was explaining is that from the day that your application was filed, probably not that long, but it's all the preparation and getting the documents together and all of that probably took quite a few weeks, if not months, yeah?
Yeah, I would say it was about a 2-year process all the way to actually getting my passport. But again, I think we had some delays with my sister having to reissue documents a lot, like because of all of the process of having to get your documents then authenticated through your own government.
Right.
That actually extends the time, because you send it, then they take 6 weeks, and then you get it back, and that's the time consuming thing, is waiting for authentication, I'd say, on so many documents.
Because that sort of adds everything up, because if you think about it, what happens is that there are several processes behind the scenes that we assist with. So one is confirmation of citizenship, the other one is registration of birth and marriage certificate, and these are different authorities, so we deal with different people and we have to get different documents. And look, I guess people also need to understand that Poland doesn't really doesn't allow electronic submission. So when we submit documents, they all have to be certified, authenticated, everything needs to be in hard copy. So there's quite a process around organizing of documents, which is what you were explaining.
Yes, yeah, that is time consuming, but it's not difficult. It's just, you know, take patience.
Yeah. All right, over to you, Andrea, for a last question or two, if you have any.
Yes. So Paula, we would like to know how helpful it has been to you to have a Polish citizenship if you're living abroad.
Sorry, could you repeat that last part? How helpful it
How
would be?
helpful
Sorry, my
it has
connection
been. It has been to have a Polish citizenship while you're living abroad.
How helpful? Yep.
Well, I mean, I just got it, so it just, you know, I just got the passport on my birthday 2 weeks ago, so I haven't even been able to use it yet, but I know it will be very helpful. So check in with me next year. I'll have more to say about it.
First of all, Paula, very happy birthday, and congratulations. We are very, very grateful that you, so early in the morning of your time, you've managed to find some time, because I think it goes, well, we're very, very happy for you. We're just delighted that, you know, a proud holder of Polish citizenship and a passport. And yes, we will catch up next year to see what you've been up to. And hopefully by then we can all travel to Poland again and, you know, see the old country, as they say. But I think what I wanted to end on is just a note about our ancestors, which are, you know, these are the people that are really so important. And we don't, you know, people don't walk around and think of their ancestors necessarily. But I think, you know, having Polish ancestors is really just the greatest asset. It's such a gift. So your mom's no longer around, your grandparents are no longer around, but now you have something that connects you with them in a really meaningful way, I think.
Yeah, it was actually really emotional when I got my passport, in particular.
Yeah. So we are extremely grateful to you, and for, you know, finding the time to talk to us and inspiring us. And we wish you all the best. Enjoy your beautiful life in the south of France, and we will look you up next year. And then you're going to tell us how wonderful it was to have a passport as well, right?
Absolutely.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Paula, and thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Andrea, from being behind the scenes, and we wish you a really, really good day, Paula.
It was nice meeting you both.
Thank you,
guys.
Bye.
Bye.